Future Warrior, Dawn of the Deimos. Chapter 1. It moved silently in near total darkness, only the feeble light of a few distant stars lighting up its lonely path and reflecting off its vast gray exterior. The faint light illuminating large white letters that seemed out of place in the cold of deep space. Surrounded by countless kilometers of dark void, the words read, UES Cerberus. Inside the great ship, as outside it, there was silence. Kilometers of passageways lay wreathed in a gaunt quiet. Nothing stirred or haunted the ship, and yet there was life. On the vast vessel's dark bridge, computers worked tirelessly to sustain it. Hundreds of crew slept in cryostasis, their lives sustained by the electronic guardians who looked after their charge's every need. The computers monitored every vital sign, providing oxygen at precise amounts, and intravenously supplying each of the 650 men and women on board with life-sustaining nourishment at precise levels to each person's individual requirements. The deep space automatic piloting and cryostasis systems were marvels of modern technology, able to keep crew alive and ships safe on long voyages, for despite the ship's plasma reactor engines, long runs to the outer colonies could still take months. Deep space travel was not only a complex and sometimes dangerous venture, it was also an endurance trial that tested men and machines to their limits. As the UES Cerberus, a Pantheon-class cruiser, glided through space, its powerful engines had been shut down by the onboard computers. This was, however, far from a disaster or unexpected. The ship's engines were on one of their regular rest intervals, the engines having propelled the ship to a predetermined velocity for a preset time had shut down to preserve fuel and to allow its reactors to cool. The stop crucial as despite the bitter cold produced by the complex reactions, the core of the great reactors still could reach critical temperatures if overused. The vessel continued silently onwards towards its distant goal, its mass barely being slowed by the almost complete lack of friction in the emptiness of space. The ship had been commissioned almost 20 years before, sailing out in full fanfare of a great spaceport floating high above the blue planet that its crew called home. Since that time, the ship had patrolled ceaselessly, hounded pirate bands to extinction, and ferried men and materials all over the known galaxy. This was another routine voyage. There had been reports of a rise in pirate activity around Delta Pavonis, an outer rim system, with several automated cargo ships reported missing. The UES Cerberus would end that threat. On the bridge, a screen suddenly flickered to life, throwing a reflection of green writing onto a nearby bulkhead. The ship's long-range radar systems had detected several objects large enough to be a threat to the ship at the edge of sensor range. Celestial bodies like asteroids were a common occurrence, and the plot showed that the ship would pass several 100,000 kilometers distant from the nearest of the objects. But as the ship's nav computer monitored the situation, something activated one of its warning protocols, and immediately more of the ship's systems began to come online or go to standby just in case they were needed. The objects were holding their positions against the gravitational pull of a nearby star, which was pulling all other objects in the region slowly but surely into its deadly grip. The nav computer brought weapons and combat guidance systems online and ran a sensor sweep at full power, but the results didn't match anything in the system's extensive sensor logs, and its logic drive was at a loss to explain the readings. It ran a diagnostic of all sensor systems, but came up green across the board. All systems were functioning normally. The logic drive in its search for answers tripped a hardwired core systems command, and the lonely screen on the bridge suddenly flashed up with a new message as the computer's activities were redirected. Activating Protocol 2418, packet data, transmission commencing, encrypting. The automated systems brought long-range communications online and energized the ship's high-powered array, diverting power from the reactors. With a powerful directional burst, the nav computer sent the scan and track progress data hurtling back down the ship's path, back towards its home, Earth. There was a sudden burst of activity from the unknown objects and the ship's computers went into emergency protocols, as in an instant all sensors and communications were jammed by extremely high-energy broadband white noise. The nav computer brought the ship to a crash stop and switched to optical guidance and scanning for all systems. Inside the ship's corridors and rooms, lights began to flicker on as the ship was brought rapidly up to full operational status. In the cryostasis cells, stimulants and pure oxygen were rapidly flushed into the crew's systems to increase the speed of their awakening from their icy sleep. The nav computer brought the ship to alert level 1 and switched defensive weapons to automatic with an engagement envelope of 1,000 kilometers. On the bridge, the senior staff's cryostasis cells reached equal pressure and temperature with the ship's internal spaces, and with a hiss they opened, revealing their still sleeping occupants. The bridge lighting activating in response, bathing the entire bridge in bright, clear, almost antiseptic light. Captain Javant Nehru was the first of the crew to awaken. He had always been a light sleeper, and it seemed to carry over to his cryo-sleep. As his eyes flickered open, he was not immediately aware that anything was amiss. He had commanded the UES Cerberus for over 3 years, and in that time, he had undergone numerous trips in cryostasis and never had experienced an emergency awakening. Without getting out of bed, he reached out and grabbed his carefully folded uniform jacket and slipped it on before swinging his feet out of the bed and standing up. There was a slight vibration through the floor. He paused, the sensation not yet reading in his still half-asleep brain. Then it happened again, and his eyes widened. My God, that's weapons fire! His body was flushed by a surge of adrenaline, and he sprinted for the command controls, not bothering to inform the other bridge officers who were just beginning to wake up in the nearby cells. Computer status? Anomaly detected, unknown object detected, Protocol 2418 in effect, electrospatial jamming detected. Perimeter safe zone established, defensive systems activated. Perimeter breach detected, weapons systems online. The slim figure of First Officer Janet Combs appeared at his side. What the hell is going on, Captain? Are we under attack? He didn't answer, and instead pushed the ship's comm button. All hands, this is the captain speaking. We are at condition red. This is not a drill. All hands to battle stations. He looked back at the display screen in front of him, trying to clear his mind enough to think. Computer-defined Protocol 2418. Protocol definitions restricted to Alpha Sirius level clearance and above, unable to comply. Nehru stared blankly at the screen. What the hell is going on? The other bridge officers had now arrived at their stations. Captain Nehru and First Officer Combs being joined by the heads of tactical operations, navigation, and the Marine Detachment Commander. Everyone gear up now? Captain Nehru looked at the numbers again, uncomprehendingly. A voice came through the comm in his ears. It was First Officer Combs. Captain, those are far too large to be pirate vessels. The largest is 4 times our size. I know, Janet. I don't know what the hell they are. Tactical, your assessment? The tactical officer's crisp voice replied immediately. Unknown type. Nothing like them in the records. The log shows that 2 of the smaller vessels approached, evaded our close and weapons fire, and then withdrew. I'm unable to get any clear readings. Too much interference. Suggest a possible first contact situation, Captain. Did we fire first? Yes, Captain, although that was after they commenced jamming and crossed into our perimeter safe zone. Captain, jamming out comms is a hostile action. We must also consider the possibility that these ships are responsible for the missing cargo vessels. Nehru took a deep breath. He was a senior flag officer with over a decade of space experience, but he had never been in a situation like this. First contact, my God. The first officer broke the silence. Captain, we have to also consider the possibility that they attacked the cargo ships to draw us here. They must have known that the UEF would eventually respond. We could be being ambushed, sir. You're quite right. Either way, we're in over our heads here. Major Latham, what's the status on our Marine fighter wings and expeditionary unit? The brusque voice of United Earth Marine Corps Major Stephen Latham came over the comm. Sir, Wings 1 and 2 are ready to launch. All 48 F-55s are armed and ready for action at your command. I have deployed the 150 men of Alpha Company to the command level, while the 150 men of Bravo Company, I have divided between the engineering and weapons levels. All right, let's get the hell out of here. Tactical lock weapons and plot a firing solution. Notify me of any aspect change in the targets. Navigation, all back full. With a burst of energy from its plasma reactors, the Cerberus began to pick up speed, moving backwards away from the strange ships. Aspect change in 3 targets. They appear to be matching speed and course. They are following us, Captain. Everyone keep cool. Dispersion shields at maximum. Major Latham, put your flights on alert status. Command, open the fighter bay doors. Tactical lock on long-range weapons, but hold fire. Targets are now increasing velocity. Possible attack run, Captain. Range 6,000 and closing fast. Neru could feel sweat growing on his forehead. What should I do? Tactical, your weapons free at the 1,000 threshold. Major, if the enemy crosses inside, 2,000 launcher fighters. Captain, range 4,000 and closing. All weapon stations report full ready. Neru could see them clearly now. They were a dark, dirty brown in color and roughly wedge-shaped. They were also covered in bulges of varying sizes, and here, in their small clusters of antennas like spikes extended from the ship's surfaces. Range 2,500. Targets are still increasing velocity. They're going to breach the threshold, Captain. As he watched the 3 strange ships split formation and like wolves began to surround the larger Cerberus. Range now 1,000. Threshold breached. Weapons away. All batteries fire at will. Captain, fighters have been deployed. Roger, tactical. Major Latham, keep one wing in close. Set the other loose. Target the enemy vessel's engines. Cripple them. From the fighter bays, the nimble F-55 Dark Stars shot out into the cold of space at full power. One wing immediately formed into 4 6-plane flights and stuck close to the cruiser. The remaining 24 targeted the nearest enemy ship and maneuvered to get a rear shot with their ASMs, anti-ship missiles, and cannons. Heavy ASMs were also cold launched from the cruiser's automated missile launchers before locking onto and blazing after the strange ships. The launchers being fed from the missile magazines buried deep within the ship structure. While around the ship, dozens of pulse cannon turrets powered up and searched for any target that closed within their effective range of 200 kilometers. The strange ships didn't react at first, and instead sped onwards, closing the distance to the Cerberus. Then from each vessel, 8 large cylinders dropped from underside doors and sped towards a UEF warship, quickly being followed by dozens of small arrow-shaped fighters which poured out of launch bays. Enemy missiles fired. Count is 24 Vampires, tracking numerous smaller craft inbound. Possible fighters, estimate 80+. Command, can we get a message out? Negative, Captain. We have no long-range communications or sensors. The jamming is too thick. We're mute and nearly blind. Captain Neru didn't reply. He was watching the ASM's plot. The first of the Cerberus's missiles had almost reached the enemy. As the powerful ASMs closed with the enemy ships, they reacted by maneuvering and launching decoys, which drew off some of the missiles, their guidance systems already affected by the powerful jamming. But most of the missiles burned through and homed in on the ships. As they approached on their terminal guidance, they were met by a whirlwind of colored scatter laser fire, which destroyed more before the surviving missiles homed in and impacted with bright flashes. Confirm 16 hits. Magazines A through D are expended. Roger that, tactical. Fire E and F, but keep G and H in reserve. Only 16 hits out of 200 missiles, Neru thought to himself. Damn it. Outside the massive ship, the marine fighters were closing at high speed on the strange vessels. As they closed, the F-55 Dark Stars launched the 2 smaller ASMs they were carrying before switching to their smaller Ms, air-to-air missiles, and cannons as the 2 groups of opposing fighters slamming into each other in a fusillade of cannon tracers, laser and missiles fire, flashes marking the death of pilots and machines. The fighters have made contact with the enemy, Captain. Thank you, Major. Tactical. Where are the enemy missiles? Closing fast, Captain. Sector G13. Computer enhance incoming missiles, Sector G13. The sector flashed and enlarged, showing the 24 large tubular-shaped missiles hurtling towards the ship. As Neru watched, something totally unexpected happened. The missiles suddenly began to shimmer and vanished. Neru froze for a second, dumbfounded. But before he could speak, they reappeared, only kilometers from the Cerberus, looking huge and unstoppable as they bore in on the ship's hull. The ship's automated close-in defenses reacted and began to open fire, but the missiles were too fast. 5 of the missiles were destroyed at point-blank range, but the rest came on. The breath caught in Captain Neru's chest. They were going to hit. Almost as one, the huge missiles slammed into the hull, and he braced himself for the inevitable explosions. But then something strange happened. None came. He released the breath he had been holding. Navigation, what's the status on the enemy vessels? Tactical, what happened with those missiles? The enemy vessels are withdrawing, Captain. At least one is seriously damaged and is venting. The enemy missiles appear not to have detonated, Captain. It could be that our energy dispersal shields somehow affected their warheads. Major, what is the status of the fighter wings? Wing 1 is -16. Wing 2 is -6, Captain. Major, recall your fighters and establish a perimeter. We must. Neru was suddenly cut off by the urgent voice of Major Latham. Sir, I have reports of fighting on decks 23, 16, and 8. We have been boarded. I have also lost contact with the engineering level. In an instant, it all became clear to Neru. The enemy ships had come into Dum. They hadn't replied with anywhere near the weapons fire he had expected. Only 8 missiles per ship. He shuddered as he realized they hadn't been missiles. They were too big. They were troop transports. Whoever or whatever was on those ships was now on board his. Neru's head swirled. My God, I have to act. What do I do? Captain, we're losing contact with the crew decks. Enemy forces appear to be moving forward. I have lost contact with nearly everyone. Major, recall all Marine units to command level. Computer seal the bridge and activate blast doors on all levels. Navigation, keep us at least 20,000 kilometers from the enemy vessels. Tactical, what are our weapons options? There was only silence. Wake up, Tactical. What are my weapons options? Captain, I have to report that all long-range weapons are down. I have lost control of all offensive weapons systems. Pulse cannon batteries are down. Engines are also down. I have no contact with anyone below Deck 17. Captain Javant Neru was lost for words as the awful truth began to dawn upon him. He had lost control of his ship. He searched desperately for the correct course of action, something that would fix things. He was still searching for answers when the 3D spatial interface suddenly went down, and he found himself back on the bridge. The bridge lights suddenly flickered and died, being replaced by the eerie red glow of emergency backup lighting. Neru looked over to Janet and saw fear in her eyes. He came to a decision. Everyone, tactical gear and weapons now move. As one, they rushed for the nearby weapons lockers and entered their personal PIN codes. The doors opening to reveal SBA suits, IAW-30 rifles, and Z8 pistols. As they got dressed, Neru tried unsuccessfully to contact the ship's computer. Computer respond. Computer authenticate Neru 119. Computer activate evacuation procedures. Shit. Computer respond. Major Latham was the first into his combat gear and began helping the others. With control of the ship lost, and as the ranking combat officer, he assumed command of the small group, totaling 4 men and 1 woman. Neru had just chambered a round in and holstered his pistol when he heard noise, a distant rumbling he couldn't quite identify. Major Latham recognized the sound instantly and glanced in the direction of the main bridge doors. That's gunfire. Everyone get behind cover. Cover that door. The major moved up to the door. Just as he leaned up against it, the access panel beeped. Someone was requesting access to the bridge. He pushed the door's intercom and was met by a burst of chaotic noise, the sound of yelling mixed with gunfire. The intercom screen, however, remained dark. This is Major Latham. Identify yourself. Over the noise, he heard a hurried reply. Major, it's Sergeant Drake. Echo Platoon F Company. We're taking fire. Open the damn door. Latham made a snap decision and pulled the manual release, the heavy reinforced blast doors opening with a hiss of compressed air. The moment they opened, the bridge was filled with the noise of roaring gunfire, and Marines began to pour in, carrying and dragging wounded men with them. They were led by a burly-looking Marine who was made even more impressive-looking by the belt-fed machine gun he was carrying, the weapon seeming to the bridge crew to be almost as big as Drake himself. "Move it, Echo, move it!" Drake fired a long burst through the door and yelled to Latham. "That's everyone who's going to make it. Secure the damn door." Latham jammed the heavy lever up and the door snapped closed. The bridge officers looked around in a daze. The bridge was filled with Marines, at least 30 of them. The Marines were all covered in sweat, blood, and grime, and all were furiously reloading or tending to wounded teammates. "Sergeant, report." Drake wiped sweat and blood from his face and turned to Latham. "Major, we are overrun. I don't know what they are, but they are hostile as hell. We didn't even know they were there until they hit us, started tearing men to pieces. Where is everyone else? Everyone else is either dead or cut off and surrounded, which is the same thing." They all spun as there was a hard knock on the blast doors followed by a grinding noise. "Shit," Drake spat. "They're coming through. I thought the heavy bridge doors would hold them a little longer." Drake turned to the startled-looking bridge officers in their pristine battle armor. "Are there any other ways out of here?" "There's a maintenance floor hatch in the back. It leads to the service conduits." Drake started moving quickly and threw a look at Janet as he passed. "A section, cover the door, B section on me." The Marines moved out, the bridge officers falling in behind Major Latham. Drake grasped the hatch and, covered by a couple of Marines, wrenched the heavy hatch open and looked in, his machine gun leading the way. The service conduit was empty. "Clear. A section, fall back. Move it, or you will become permanent residents." The first group of Marines were already in the conduit and being followed by the officers when the bridge blast doors exploded, sending pieces of lethal shrapnel slicing across the bridge. Captain Nehru was just going down the hatch when the bridge doors went and was buffeted by the blast. As he recovered, he saw something truly horrifying. Through the smoking hole where the blast doors had been were charging dozens of tall, slender creatures. They were like visions of hell. They wore compact, close-fitting armor and had elongated oval heads with wide mouths filled with shark-like teeth. Some were carrying short, compact weapons that spat bursts of green energy fire, while others wielded wicked, long blades and smaller pistol-type energy weapons. Nehru froze entranced, oblivious in his shock. The creatures had long limbs and moved with an inhuman grace and speed, shooting, slicing and biting their way through the staggering remains of the A-Section Marines. He suddenly became aware of someone shouting into his ear and looked numbly at Drake. Drake's mouth was moving, but Nehru couldn't understand or hear the words. He saw Drake unclip a grenade and throw it. He then bodily shoved Nehru down the hatch and jumped in, dragging the hatch closed behind him. "Move your arse, Captain, or I'll leave you here for them." Nehru began to fumble down the conduit. Drake dropped his empty ISW-90, infantry support weapon type 90, and drew his Z-8 sidearm and hurried after the captain, the group having to crouch in the confined space. They hustled along before popping another service hatch and cautiously entering a lower deck corridor. Latham, Drake, and the remaining Marines secured the corridor while the shaken officers tried to work out where they were. "We're on deck 9, one below the command deck. We need to get to deck 12 and the escape pods this way." They all fell in behind Drake as he led the way based on the tactical officer's directions. After about 100 meters of corridors, they reached a sealed door. Drake checked it and put his ear to the door. After a moment, he nodded, and a Marine punched in an access code, the door opening with a hiss. The ragtag group were immediately struck by a strong smell. Drake, Latham, and the Marines recognized it instantly, the smell of freshly spilt blood. "Heads up! Stay frosty, Marines. Those bastards are here somewhere." The group moved forward, Janet letting out an involuntary gasp as she passed through the doorway. The walls were slick with blood, and the corridor was covered in scattered debris. She received a stern look from Drake and quickly regained control of herself as they moved on slowly and quietly, not daring to look in the rooms they passed. Drake edged around a corner and saw movement as something crossed an intersection up ahead. He froze, every muscle tensed, and his senses strained to locate what it was, but he saw nothing. Whatever it was had gone. He motioned the tactical officer to the front and quietly asked him which way. Right, then we'll be at the elevators. We can take the service stairs straight down to Deck 12. They come out right at the starboard bank of escape pods. Using hand signals, Drake directed a couple of the Marines to secure the corridor ahead and then moved on towards the elevators. The lifts were sealed as per the lockdown protocol, but one of them was half ajar and the inside of it was filled with blood, red drag marks leading out and around a nearby corner. Naru moved closer to Drake. Where are the bodies? Drake looked at the man. He looked pale. He was a naval captain. They never saw the blood and death firsthand. Clearly, he was out of his depth, Drake thought. I have no fucking idea. You want to go look, be my guest? Major Latham put a hand on Drake's shoulder. Easy, lad. Let's keep it moving. Drake nodded. Ramirez, Lee, secure the stairs, go. Two Marines stepped forward and carefully opened the door to the stairwell, and wedging the door open with their IW-30CS, they peered inside. The stairwell proving empty. All clear, Sarge. Move down and secure the next doorway, go. They began to file into the stairwell and move down. Drake stayed behind, covering the door. The last man had just entered when Drake heard a noise, and one of the creatures came around the corner. It froze as it saw Drake. The creature and Drake locked eyes. The creature seemed to grin and leer, revealing its rows of shark-like teeth. Its face had two small pitch-black eyes. To Drake, they seemed like the darkest pits of hell itself. It lunged with breathtaking speed, and Drake squeezed the trigger on his Z8. The heavy pistol jumped in his hand as it fired short, heavy rounds as fast as he could work the trigger. The noise in the stairwell and narrow corridor was deafening. The creature caught the full force of the fire, and with a splatter of yellow-green liquid crashed to the floor, twitching and spasming. The pistol clicked as it ran dry. Drake pushed the release and dropped the empty clip to the floor with a clatter and slammed at a fresh one, his last. He looked down the stairwell. Everyone was looking at him, seemingly frozen in time. Run, goddammit! He charged down the stairs after them as they scattered before him like a flock of startled geese. In moments they burst onto Deck 12 and sprinted for the escape pods. The group saw that there was only one door that still had a green indicator display. They ran for it. Like wraiths, creatures appeared in the adjoining corridors and out of the stairwell, and flashes of bright green energy fire filled the narrow space. People beginning to go down. Marines hold the line. Drake stopped and started pouring carefully aimed shots, not even flinching as a bolt of green energy struck his arm and blood sprayed. The few Marines still standing rallied to Drake, who had been joined by Major Latham. Drake turned desperately to Janet and the other bridge officers. Go! They broke and ran for the escape pod. Janet hit the door access. As she turned, she saw Captain Naru take a hit to the back and collapse. The tactical officer stopping to help him also fell. Drake and a few of the Marines were still standing. He was yelling at her. Go, get out of here, Warren Earth, go! She dived into a pod and took one last look as the door closed. She saw that all the other bridge officers were down and bleeding, the navigation officer firing wildly from the hip. She saw Drake drop his empty pistol and draw a wide-bladed combat knife from his thigh. Just a wall of creatures crashed over him and the last of the Marines. She dived onto the pod's pilot's seat and desperately strapped herself in. Then there was an audible thump on the door. She hit the launch control. A jolt heavy threw her violently into the seat as the pod launched, clearing the ship in less than a second. Once clear, the pod's onboard computer, kept updated of the situation by the ship's computer before it was shut down, automatically launched senior decoys along with a powerful jamming pod. After a quick course calculation, the pod jumped into hyperspace using its one-time jump engine and vanished from sight, leaving the lost UES Cerberus, and starting a sequence of events that would blaze across the galaxy.